Someone once said that history is an illumination of the soul, and with this album, Maiden once more shine a bright light on some pretty epic narratives. But is it any good? Let's find out, shall we? Welcome classic rock fans to an episode of New Album Review, and today we're looking at this one, Iron Maiden Senjutsu. Before we start, I'd like to say a huge thank you to Jamie, who is one of my Patreons, for sending me this. Thank you so much for that. And also use it as an opportunity for a shameless plug. If you're interested in supporting this channel, do think about becoming a Patreon. There's a fine body of work on there now. Do check the link below. This album is all part of the Iron Maiden Renaissance, which sees them exploring different avenues of expression and thought and ideas, and it hasn't seen them revel in mawkish nostalgia. Instead, they're producing albums full of these epic prog-leaning, dramatic forays, which are just absolutely fascinating in terms of their dynamics. And yes, they've put out some lengthy pieces before, but this modern era Maiden have really, I think, pushed the boat out in terms of their sonic exploration of these grand, overarching narratives. Don't get me wrong, this album is not Topographic Oceans or Pawn Hearts, but there's some pretty cinematic pieces on here, no doubt designed to worry the shit out of Dream Theater. And this album is just another one of those, full of metallic crunch we'd expect from them, but also exploring some pretty interesting avenues. This band, it seems, are as chameleonic as their ever-changing talisman, Eddie. This is their second double studio album, of course the first being 2015, I think it was, The Book of Souls. It's as ambitious, but it sets a slightly different tone, I think. In fact, according to The Guardian, if you'll forgive me for quoting The Guardian, tempered by a more windswept, melancholic vibe. However, it's this that fascinates me with this record. That's what I find compelling about it. Maiden in general, and specifically this album, is like a matured wine, which rather suits the weathered and oaken quality of Bruce Dickinson's voice these days. He's still got a fine pair of tonsils on him though. But we have to consider these guys are all in their 60s. You know, those that harken after that classic Maiden of the 80s, those shorter pieces, those frenetic pieces, are probably going to be disappointed with this album. I'm probably going to call it all hype and bluster. But those people are the sort that probably didn't like Book of Souls either. I'm going to lay my cards on the table. I really enjoyed Book of Souls. However, I think this album is better than Book of Souls. I find it more thematically connected or unified, if that makes sense. And to quote the McDonald's advert, I'm just loving it. This is a band that are now steadfast in pursuing a more thematic, prog-like saunter across a vast, intriguing thematic landscape, all about tone and atmosphere, rather different from galloping at breakneck speed to that final note and phrase, all about power and impression. This is no doubt a matured band. And the songs on this album explore some interesting territories, from that very southern rock vibe we got with Writing on the Wall, to the almost psychedelic tinge with the beginning of it anyway, Lost World or Lost in the Lost World. Actually listening to that song last night, and I'm probably the only one here, in my head I was constantly thinking of Uriah Heep's Lady in Black. Anyone else spot a similarity? Maybe not. One critic has pointed out that it has some very folksy quality to it, a bit like Iron Maiden meets the Incredible String Band. I've got an ISB, Incredible String Band, in my notes. When I rehearsed this, I keep thinking IBS, Irritable Bowel Syndrome. There's probably not a lot of difference between the two, I suspect. There's definitely a bit of minstrel in the gallery, shall we say. There's an oldie, worldy, medieval feel to parts of this record. And I'm not the only one to think so. If I may quote The Guardian once more, this album has a palpably ancient bearing that calls to mind castles, barricades, mud-caked peasants and heroic daring-do. The wonderfully overblown death of the Celts is a case in point. And a point that I've made so far, some might say laboured, is the difference between Maiden's later career stuff and the stuff they put out in the 1980s. Many of their peers, of course, have produced albums that are distinctly designed to be reminiscent of what many consider to be their classic period. Black Sabbath's 13, Judas Priest's, what was that album they did? Judas Priest's Firepower, I think it was. And of course Metallica's Hardwired to Self-Destruct. But it seems Maiden's topography is constantly shifting. And they're not a band that shy away from performing these albums in their entirety when they play live, which is wonderful. It shows they're a band that has 100% faith in the material they're putting out and what they're doing, and they're not quite ready yet to be dismissed as nothing more than a heritage act. And as I've said, the material on this album substitutes that high-octane gallop for more progressive textures and song structures and exploration of atmosphere. Senjutsu definitely continues in this vein. It's another thoughtful, expansive and cinematic album, which has very much been the standard Maiden fare of late, certainly since what I call the Great Reset, that is from Brave New World onwards. If I may quote Pitchfork, Senjutsu is at its most thrilling when it's refining the Brave New World template and indeed expanding on it. The aforementioned track Lost in the Lost World is fantastic because it's full of these acoustic reveries that seem to bookend the number. Writing the Wall feels like they're very much borrowing from the country blues aesthetic, which seems somewhat odd really for this progged out version of Maiden. It's a very dark and heavy album, there's no doubt about that, with some interesting biblical and literary themes that are explored. Writing on the Wall dips into the Old Testament and Belshazzar's Feast. And the title track is a brooding, pugnacious affair. I love the drama of this one with gorgeous, melancholic guitar phrasing, and the chorus is just a real hook from the get-go, and Bruce Dickinson's beautifully double-tracked vocals just lure you in. If this band have slowed down at all, they haven't lost any of their epic grit. So let's talk more about some of the songs on this record. Darkest Hour is full of these Churchillian ruminations that has the hairs standing up on the back of my neck. And it's just some of these arrangements of these songs are almost symphonic in their context and proportions. I'm reminded of a famous quote by Lou Reed. He said that one chord is fine, two chords are pushing it, three chords and you're into jazz. I wouldn't say Maiden are quite ready yet for loafers and gauloises, but nevertheless this album is a knotty affair. Days of Future Past has nothing to do with the Moody Blues, but it's an anthemic number. Death of the Celts is a historical epic, of course, that very much has come to define Maiden's recent albums, hypnotic musically as Dickinson narrates a tale of Celtic warriors willing to sacrifice themselves for glory and immortality. The Parchment, excellent use of three guitars here that blends cinematic strings with almost a military march guitar riffing. Hell on Earth is an anthemic number with hooks aplenty, these wonderful histrionic guitar parts and sweeping sections. The Time Machine has a strange mythical quality to it. In fact, NME have described this one as wouldn't have been out of place on their Dance of Death album. This band, thematically, in terms of their subject matter, have covered a lot of ground over the years, especially with their references of history and literature. I mean, we get ancient Egypt, dystopian futuristic narratives, Mayan beliefs, to this latest offering with a distinct Eastern flavour, or Far Eastern flavour, I mean. Overall, I have to say I've really, really enjoyed this record. It feels like a journey of absolute epic proportions. With every new Maiden album, I expect kind of a bit of a slog before it really beds in with me, but this one I just loved it as soon as I played it. I much prefer it to Book of Souls, and those of you who have seen my Maiden ranking video, which would probably be very different now, I can honestly say I rate this album higher than Book of Souls. Nico, the drummer, has said that this is the best album we've ever done. The cynic in me suspects that he probably would say that, but on listening to this record, it's damn good. How high it climbs for me over the years, I don't know. Whether it knocks off those Iron Maiden landmarks off the top spot, I Number the Beast, Power Slave, and Peace of Mind, of course, remains to be seen. But I'm beginning to feel in my gut that I'm loving this album almost as much. And there's no doubt, and in keeping with the medieval theme, that this album is a vital link in the Maiden chainmail. Anyway, I'm going to end with a Rolling Stone quote. Although they never approach anything as grandiose as the 18-minute Empire of the Clouds from their last album, or the armchair academia of past epics like the interpretation of Samuel Taylor Coleridge's Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, or 1984's Power Slave, the meatiest songs here show the maturity that Iron Maiden have grown into. Anyway, you've been watching a review, albeit a short review, of Iron Maiden's new album Senjutsu. I apologise for being rather late to the party with this one. I know there's like 100 reviews out there of this record, and if you've made it to this point in my video, I would like to thank you for taking the time to just watch another one. Anyway, it just leaves me to say I hope you're all well, hope you're enjoying what's left of our summer, and staying warm, staying healthy, but more importantly that you keep listening.